Hello, listeners. Welcome to IT Guy Who Lifts podcast. I'm your host, Palash Gupta, Diploma in Nutrition and Fitness Sciences from INFS India, and Bachelor's in Sports and Exercise Science from Loughborough University, UK. The goal of this podcast is to understand science and science based tools with the help of industry experts so that we can further optimize our training and nutrition program. With that in mind, let's jump right into today's podcast. Complete 24 hours, right? It can be a bit longer, it can be a bit shorter. What are your points on how much, how many hours does our circadian rhythm on an average exist? Is it really 24 hours or there is some kind of a plus minus error over there?
The average is 24 hours and 17 minutes.
Okay.
But again, that's an average. And this, as I say, gives us just that flexibility for the lengthening over the season. But there are, differences. There are some people who have shorter and longer circadian rhythms. There are some people who have a condition called non-24-hour circadian rhythm. So their circadian rhythm doesn't follow a 24-hour pattern. Basically, they just free run, as it's known. Their sleep changes across weeks and progressively across the 24-hour period. And the other thing is that there are people who have different strength of circadian rhythm. Now, if you imagine a circadian rhythm is
Mm.
like a sine wave, so you have a peak around midday and you have a trough around midnight. Well, for some people, that's a lot flatter. So there isn't as much difference between day and night. So these people are pretty immune to things like jet lag
Okay.
because there isn't much difference or shift work. And so these people may self-select because working shifts is difficult for some people, whereas for others, they seem to do it okay, or like airline pilots, anything like that. So it may be that people just self-select. Some people can cope, other people can't. And I know a friend of mine, when we were doing jet lag studies, she didn't have much of the amplitude, magnitude of the amplitude, and she, you know, you couldn't really tell the difference between the day that she was, fully adapted and the day that she was badly adapted. Whereas for me, I felt terrible for a few days and then felt better. She just felt pretty constant. So, as I say, we're all individuals, but, the circadian rhythm, as I say, because it is set by light in most people, runs pretty regularly. It resets back each day when the sun comes up.
Definitely. So that explains a lot. That was a really great thing to know that different people have different sort of and magnitude and amplitude of you can say the circadian rhythm. And these people are like those people who do not have that steep curve of a sine wave. They might feel better during working in a different kind of shifts, right? Just as you mentioned. So that was a new thing to know. Uh, Even though I have read a lot about the sleep, and this was a really, really eye opener for me. And with that in mind, so how much sleep does one need, Dr. Neil Staley? Because we see that first of all, I would like to ask you this question in perspective of the different you can say different ages of our humankind. Like when we have seen that people or basically the infants they sleep way longer than the people who are in their elderly, right? So these kind of a basically the recommendation that we have been given. What are those recommendations and what are your viewpoints on those recommendations?
Okay, right. Well, sleep, going back to what we said earlier, sleep's important for memory, learning, and growth. Now, that means that for a child, sleep is the most important thing. because when a child is born, it knows nothing, it's quite small, and it's got to learn and memorize an awful lot. Um, and so sleep is vitally important. So for a newborn baby, they need around 16 to 20 hours sleep a day, because basically everything is new to them. So a baby should be given the opportunity to be asleep. Yeah. And you should never need to wake a child up. If a child is sleeping, leave the child to sleep. It's doing something really, really important. So, let's say 16 to 20 hours for a newborn. This time reduces. So, essentially, a 10-year-old child needs approximately 10 hours of sleep. So, you've got 2 points on a graph, just draw a relatively straight line between them. And that will give you a rough estimate of how much sleep a child has. A child will start recognizing the difference between day and night around 6 months old.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't respect day and night, but it recognizes there is a difference between the two. And so, in order for a child to get the sleep it needs, until 4 years old or so, it should be getting 2 pretty long daytime naps. Until they're 6, maybe 1 long daytime nap. But again, it's giving the child the ability to have the sleep it needs. So when you get to a 10-year-old, you have 10 hours. There was a bit of a drop after that until you become a teenager. Now, in sleep, when we talk about teenagers, we talk about somebody from about 10 to about 25, because it's not absolutely clear. But so
Yeah.
there's a bit of a drop, and then teenagers are different in 2 ways. Teenagers need more sleep than adults. The reason for this is because they're going through puberty. So there are physical and emotional changes which are occurring. They need sleep. That's the teenagers need to sleep longer. But also, for some reason, and we don't know why, teenagers need to go to bed later. There's a shift in their biological rhythm. So your average teenager should be going to sleep around 11:30 and sleeping from between 9 and 9.5 hours. And that puts them into conflict with school start time. Schools commonly start early in the morning,
Yeah.
and teenagers are not at their best. So for you waking up at 7 o'clock, for a teenager, that's like waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You waking up at 6 o'clock, like waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning for them. So they're not at their best. So once you go through your teenage years, somewhere in your early 20s, your adult sleep pattern becomes fixed. So the amount of sleep you need does not greatly change between around 20, 25 years old and 85. It doesn't change much. That's the time. What does change is the ability to get the sleep that you need. Because
Okay.
what happens as you get older is you lose that deep N3 sleep. And you start losing that progressively from around, in men, around 35 years old, in women from around 55 years old. And that deep sleep, as I mentioned earlier, is the bit that keeps you asleep. And it's also the bit that makes you feel like you've had a good night's sleep. So when you get elderly, you can sleep through the night, but you wake up and you go, well, so what? you know, what happened? Nothing happened. I don't feel great. I don't feel much different. And the other thing is you're more easily woken up because you don't have that protective sleep. And when you are woken up, there is little to put you back to sleep because you don't need to get that deep, slow sleep. So when we become elderly, we wake up more often and we stay awake. And because there are more things, you know, things like pain or anxiety or noise or whatever, there are more things to wake us up. That's what causes the deterioration in sleep. But it's important to say there are some, whilst there are natural changes in sleep, there are some unnatural changes in sleep, things like sleep apnea or the desire to
Yeah.
get up and go to the bathroom. These are not normal. They're not a normal part of aging. So, yes, poor sleep is common, but thinking, oh, I'm old, therefore, what can I expect? Isn't a good thought. So you need to make sure that what can be treated is treated and what can't be treated you accept. So a lot of people who are 80 years old are saying, you know, I want to sleep when I was the way I did when I was 20, because when I was 20, sleep was really, really good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're 80 years old. Things don't stay the same. So that's the important thing. As we get older, we still need the same amount of sleep. We just find it more difficult to get the sleep. And then in terms of hours, as I say, it's usually recommended everybody needs 8 hours sleep. But as I say, this has never been said by anybody in 600 years of people writing about sleep. Sleep need is a bit like height. So it's
Okay.
individual and it's genetically determined. So just as you have short people and you have tall people, then the same's true of sleep. There are some people who only need 4 hours sleep and they will absolutely thrive on 4 hours sleep. There's no negative impact of that. They're fine. There are other people who need 11 hours sleep to feel at their best. After 40 years involved in sleep, I know I need 9.5 hours sleep to feel at my best. And so it's not about a magic number of hours. It's about the right amount of sleep for you. Now, as a 9.5 hour person, I cannot train myself to be a 4 hour night person
Yeah.
because it's genetic. In the same way that I'm nearly 2 meters tall, which is great, except for when I have to fly economy on a budget airline, and I wish I was shorter. But there's no point me going to the airport and standing there going, I wish I was shorter, I wish I was shorter. It's not going to happen. So you need to get the amount of sleep you need, whatever that is, and you need to find that as an individual. And the way you do that goes back to the question I said earlier. How do you feel during the day? If you
Okay.
feel awake, alert, focused at the top of your game during the day, you've had enough sleep. Don't
Hmm.
question it. If you feel tired during the day, well, that doesn't really tell
Tells
me
us. Yeah.
much. Tired is just having a bad day. Tired is having it's dark and cold and miserable outside. I didn't win the lottery. I had a row with the wife. I've had a bad day. That's tiredness. But that's nothing to do with your sleep. If you have a problem with your sleep, you will be sleepy. Now, you might say,
Yeah.
well, what's the difference between being tired and being sleepy? Surely that's just semantics. No, if you walk up 3 flights of stairs, when you get to the top, do you need a
You will
sit
feel tired.
down or do you need a sleep? If you need a sit down, you're tired, you're fatigued, you're exhausted.
Makes
If you need
sense.
a sleep, you're sleepy, and that's the key thing. Just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean that you've had bad sleep. If you at this moment could lie on the floor and fall asleep, then you've not had a good night's sleep. But just feeling a bit
Okay.
annoyed with life isn't a sign of not sleeping well. So I say, if you feel good, don't worry about it. If you feel sleepy, then look for something to change. And as I say, you have to give yourself the ability to get the sleep you need. So 1 hour less sleep than you need is a sleep problem. So if you're an 11-hour night person and you only get 10 hours sleep, your friends and colleagues might say, wow, you had 10 hours sleep last night.
Yeah.
But for you, that's not enough. And so that's the problem.
100%. Like that opens up a whole uh, can of worms to for the people to think about that. Yes, if you want to find out that how much sleep you need, you can determine it through how you feel during the day, right? If you feel daytime drowsiness, if you feel sleepy, and you just have beautifully differentiated that what is being tired means and what is being sleepy means. So that should ring a lot of bells in people's ears when they think that how much they should be sleeping. So because we hear and see a lot of recommendation even on the websites like which are really highly reputed websites, right? National Sleep Foundation, where they mentioned clearly that we need 8 to 10 hours, right? Now we get to know, okay, this recommendation between 8 to 11 hours is dependent on that individual, right? And different people have different needs, just as you mentioned. So this makes a lot of sense as well. So on the top of that, Dr. Neil, are there any gender differences, right? Changes or the requirement of sleep for women versus men? You have mentioned these things in your big book as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some gender differences. The main one is this loss of slow wave sleep. Men start losing their slow wave sleep a lot earlier than women. And
Okay.
this probably has an evolutionary basis that women have more complex lives.
Yeah.
Men's lives are were relatively simple. We hunted, we protected. That was that was all we had to do. Women had to bring up children and that sort of thing. So their lives were more complex. So this means that on average, men have worse sleep when we get to our 60s compared to women. Um, Women are also more sensitive to um, being disturbed at night
Okay.
because women are, monitoring the safety of their children, and so they're more things are liable to wake them up more. Um, that's the main difference that there is between men and women. Women seem to uh, and women have these hormonal changes
Yeah.
across their life, which impact sleep, but underlying that their sleep is relatively robust because they have to be because nature
Yeah.
prizes women. Women are useful to society. Women you know, keep society together, and I say they can have children. Men are completely replaceable to nature. We're not worth much, so nature doesn't really put too much effort into us, but it does put into women. So women, as I say, underlying have better sleep. It's just the hormonal changes that happen through their life can disrupt sleep. Um, but again, it's that individual. So uh, probably my sleep compared to your sleep is more different than my sleep compared to my partner's sleep. Do you know what I
Okay.
mean? So it's an individual difference. It doesn't matter that she's a woman and I'm a man. we're individuals, so everything is an average, and that's the problem. Everything, it just reduces us to a figure um, without recognizing our individuality. So this is again. So the average woman sleeps better than the average man, but the average
Okay.
woman and the average man don't exist. So that's a meaningless thing to say. Um, so gender isn't, as I say, it's much more to do with that role that we have. So when I was talking earlier about short sleepers, um, you might say, well, why do we have short sleepers? What's the point? Why have they survived through history, through evolution? There is a theory that they were useful because in the past we had to have people who protected the village at night.
Okay. Night
So
watchers, basically.
short sleepers would sleep, you know, outside the group and would be our early warning system. And so it seems like genetically we have this group of specialist guard people who've evolved like that. So that it might be at a very practical level
Yeah.
that we have these genetic differences, and I say that genetic differences between individuals is, or the variability is probably much greater than the variability between genders.
Yeah, because the reason behind that question was since you just beautifully mentioned that women are essential for the society and for the evolutionary perspective, right? Because they have the only ability to further continue the generation, and we are, as a man, do not play that much of a significant role other than providing the genetic material. That's it. So I thought, and they also have hormonal changes going on, not within over the definitely over the period of years, but within the period of like weeks they have menstrual
Yeah, yeah,
cycle.
yeah,
Yeah, so I thought they might be needing a different kind of approach towards the sleep, or they might be needing more hours of sleep, but that could be said the same depending on the individual which you just mentioned,
yeah,
because every individual is different. So some women can handle entire sleep cycle within 6 hours. Some might be needing 11 hours to completely feel refreshed and perform at the top of their game. And that we can only know how you feel during the daytime.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, this simple explanation sorts a lot of yeah, guessing around, we can basically, I must say. So I think we have covered a lot of things when it comes to the totality of sleep, what sleep is, and how does sleep cycle pans out, what it role, basically how much do we need and how we can identify. So now I would like you to throw upon the light that why sleep is important. You just mentioned that yes, it is important for health, and we have seen the cost of insomnia as well, how it is important for learning. Because in our sports science, me being a sports scientist, we have this proposition that if you're not sleeping well, your ability to learn a highly skilled motor recruitment movement, right? Any kind of a sports specific movement gets hampered down. And it has been shown in the, you can say, research literatures as well, that if you are getting sleep deprived or sleep restricted, you are not performing at the top of your game, and let alone you will not be able to even learn a new skill or perform that particular skill that you have already learned at the level when you were sleeping in a optimal environment or the optimal amount of hours. So how much sleep is important, Dr. Neil?
Yeah, and this is a good question. Certainly, as you say, from the sports perspective, this is something that's become a topic of research over the last 10 or so years, and there are two basic uh, benefits. One is physiological, and one is psychological. Basically, sleep is about what we call homeostasis, which basically just means balance. It keeps the whole system running at its best. And we know that deep sleep, that N3 sleep, is involved in muscle repair, muscle regeneration.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 Yeah.
We know sleep's important for body weight. The more sleep you are, the more you consume calories, more uh, rubbish, junk food you eat, fatty, sugary foods. So there's the physiological benefits of sleep. So there was work done with a basketball team that showed that sprint speeds can improve by close to 10% by getting longer sleep. But the most important part of sleep for us as humans is regarding the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the bit of the brain that's just behind the forehead, and it's the bit of the brain that's pretty much unique to humans. And
Okay.
it does the clever stuff. It does the stuff that makes you a human. Without the prefrontal cortex, you would essentially be a hairless monkey. Monkeys are clever. Monkeys are very, very clever, but they're still monkeys. We're not. We're humans. And the reason we're humans is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex does things like planning, problem solving, decision making, pattern recognition, being able to be creative. Uh, Also does the inhibition, the ability to control our emotions. Um, and so it is that bit of the brain that is most affected by poor sleep. So when you've had a poor night's sleep, you basically, to a degree, lose your ability to function as a clever human.
100%.
Um, and so you talked about learning, you talked about uh, taking in new information, problem solving. How do I get out of this situation, or how is there a workaround? Is there a way I can do this easier? Can I be creative, or do I just respond by instinct? And these executive functions, as they're known, are at the basis of everything we do. So when you become sleepy, you are more at risk of an accident. Now,
Yeah.
that may be you hit your finger when you're trying to hammer a nail into the wall. Yeah, it hurts, but nobody died. But exactly the same process happens in something like the Chernobyl explosion, where many people died. So it's not the way the accident happened, it's what the accident was that's important, because the way the accident happened is exactly the same. Your judgment is impaired, your reaction time is impaired, um, your ability to respond to a situation, your ability, as I say, to make the right decisions, to actually take that decision. All of these things are impaired. So it doesn't matter. You can't say that Chernobyl was a different accident than hitting your thumb with a hammer. It's the same accident. It's just a bigger
On a
accident.
bigger scale.
And so that's what essentially sleep is important for, is the ability to be human at the very basic level. The more sleepy you are, the more arguments you have, the less empathy you have with other people. You don't want to make up the argument. You have an argument with your partner, and you keep having an argument with the partner. You don't see, maybe I should shut up and make up. You
Yeah.
keep going. The same thing with say decision making, taking the information in and then using that information. And this is the space shuttle Challenger that it blew up because of the rocket fuel booster had a leak and it blew up. And people say, well, that was a mechanical failure. Well, it wasn't. It was actually a psychological failure, because the launch team had been told that you can't launch when the air temperature is below zero. And they were told that it was going to be -4. So they were told that information. They knew that it was against the rules, but they never connected the information with the rules because they were sleep deprived. So they heard the information,
Okay.
they didn't use the information, so they made the wrong decision
This,
because of that, even though they had been told. And so it's this sort of thing that affects. So let's say you can then extrapolate that to situations. I mentioned the basketball team earlier about their sprint speed, but also what improved was their 3-point throw accuracy.
yeah.
Why? Because, and this is very fundamental. They knew, or they could accurately calculate the size of the ball and the size of the hoop and the trajectory of the ball into the hoop. Because again, one of the things that is affected is your judgment of size. So when
100%.
you're sleepy and you're driving, and you come to a narrow road, you don't perceive that it might be too narrow. So even things like that, even and you might think, okay, to be able to throw a 3-pointer in basketball, you have to be really good. No, you have to understand basic physics. And
Yeah.
if that goes, then you lose it. And this is the problem. And you can look at this in sport. You can They call it different things in different sports. But essentially it is very, very simply just lack of sleep. So, in golf they call it the jips, where you just suddenly can't pop the ball.
Yes.
You just can't do it. Why? Because you've lost that ability to judge distance, speed, etc. And you can see this. People rather like to give it some sort of magical name as though it's something unique, but it's not. It's simply lack of sleep, and that's what we forget how fundamental sleep is. We say, oh, I had a bad day. No, you didn't have a bad day. You had a bad sleep
Night.
that
Yeah.
made your day bad. And so when you see a sportsman uh, telling you a story of why they didn't perform well, you just need to look at it and think, I bet you either you didn't sleep well or you're jet lagged. We now have the ability for teams to, fly in and fly out of countries.
Yes.
Whereas in the old days, I don't know, from England to um, India, it would be what, 2 months on a boat? So that's fine, and 2 months home. Now you fly there in 9 hours, you play a game of football or handball or volleyball, you fly back. Um,
100%.
and there is work that was done in America looking at baseball and also American football, showing that people who travel to the matches, so home field advantage is a thing
Yeah.
in America
100%.
because you have to, in Britain it doesn't matter. You're only an hour, an hour's flight away from anywhere. But in America, where you have to fly huge distances, then suddenly that and with something like basketball where they're playing 2 or 3 matches a week, people are just never going to be sleeping, and so playing at home is very, very good for you. Um, and so all of these things, the Olympics are in China, and you're British. You go to China, you're completely
Out
jet
of sync.
lagged.
Yeah.
Or you watch boxing, and the boxing matches are sort of for an English person boxing in Las Vegas. You're boxing at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning, according to your body.
Yeah.
That can't be good for you. you're not, nobody is good. Even if you've tried to be there, you're not going to be at your best. So, this is the thing, that sleep is important, but, certainly competition, international competition, because it mucks your sleep up, will have a significant impact on your performance. And as I say, not a, it is not a, it's not a gross effect. It's not that it's not that you can't play basketball anymore.
Yeah,
It's all the little executive functions which are affected, which just means you're not going to be at your best. And
best.
so, this is what happens. Nobody can explain, as I say, a sportsman will explain it in mythical terms, but actually it just comes back to you're not doing your job as well. A tennis player will suddenly, not get the ball in the court. It may
Yeah,
just by millimeters, but it doesn't matter. It could be a millimeter or it could be 10 meters. You've lost the point.
yes.
And so it's those very little differences that can have a huge effect. Same, we're saying with anything. If you miss a golf putt, it doesn't matter. You've missed
How?
it.
Yeah, you
You,
missed
you,
it.
you've missed. That's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter whether it's by a small bit or a lot. You've missed. Um,
100%.
and this is why we don't, or this is why we often don't recognize it, because it is just that small change that suddenly has a big consequence, and we don't notice. We think, well, it's just not happening for me today. And rather than, say, it's just you a bit off, you're not at 100%, and that's when things don't work. So that's why I say that there has been this a massive increase in certainly in the sports science area, where people are talking now about sleep, because if you're a professional athlete, if you're world class, then you've got the nutritionist, the psychologist, the speed coach, the endurance coach, except you've got all of these people. So how do you become better? If you're already at the peak, what how can you get that little bit better? And sleep is the one bit that hasn't been
Addressed.
um, talked about. Now, back in 2012, um, Denmark decided that they weren't going to send a huge team to the Beijing Olympics because it was a bit of a waste of money, to be honest. If you're not, so they concentrated on the 16 athletes that they expected to win medals, and those were the only people who were going to go. And so there was a lot of work done with these athletes to improve their sleep, because they could throw all the resources at just these few people to make them as good as they could be. Because, as I say, if you're a if you're bronze medal standard, how do you ever win gold? You need that little bit extra. You're already brilliant, beyond anything that you or I would ever do, but you're not good enough. So
Yep.
what can give you that benefit? So that was the thing with using sleep in that terms, was that you, again, exactly what we said, was looking at them as individuals, because there were only 16 individuals rather than a team of 400 or whatever, and you'd have to do it for everybody. So looking at an individual and improving their sleep will make a positive difference to that individual in their sports performance. There's no doubt about that.
100%. Like, you opened up a whole lot of a new level of wisdom. You actually shot down multiple targets with the same bullet. Like, if we are lacking in sleep, yes, our prefrontal cortex is not performing as optimal as we like it to be, and we have seen that our probability of taking higher risk goes up exponentially if you are lacking in sleep, right? So if you are at a business partnership meeting, or you want to make a really, really good decision where you can either cost your entire company, or you can make it into another Fortune 500. And if you are not focusing on your sleep, or you are lacking in sleep, like one poor decision can break it all, right? The
Yeah.
same that you just mentioned, that athletic performance, those sprinters like Usain Bolt, the amount of differences in the top three finishers of the sprinters of 100-meter, it's almost like in microseconds, basically microseconds. And if your sleep is not on point, you lost your medal. Look, whether you lost it through 5 microseconds or by 5 milliseconds, you lost that entire match, right? That is the main important thing.
And you see people who lose the race before, literally as the, talking about the
Yeah,
sprint,
100%.
gun goes off, and they've lost. Doesn't matter how fast they run, they
Yep.
didn't react to that gun as quickly as the others.
Yes.
So they're always one pace behind, which, and as you say, say we use the analogy in sport, but you cleverly, did that into the business world. How many people have gone into a situation, flown overnight to New York, literally got off the aircraft, go into a business meeting, say, here I am, and just make a mess of it.
Yes.
They can't read the room. We know that people who don't have sleep don't understand body language.
Yep.
They have a more negative tone of voice. As you mentioned, they're more liable to take risk. The sleep you are, the more risky behaviour you're willing to take. So, on the plane over, uh, the stewardess says, another, glass of wine, and he goes, well, I shouldn't have the glass of wine because I've got to be fresh for tomorrow. But so what? Doesn't matter. And that could be the thing. And again, it's not the glass of wine, it's the accepting the glass of wine. It's
Yep.
not thinking the consequences. And yeah, I mean, there are so many people, and this is now magnified on Twitter, where you can say stupid things without thinking about it. And
100%.
I keep looking at the things, the tweets that Elon Musk puts out sometimes, and I keep thinking you do need more sleep.
Yeah.
You really, because yes, obviously he's a genius, but obviously he doesn't make correct decisions. And again, this can only be down to something like lack of sleep. It can't be, that he desperately wants to crash the Tesla share price.
Yep.
There isn't that little thing in his
Thinking
head
behind.
sitting there
Yeah.
saying, "Don't say that. Just don't." And this is it. So you know, if you examine your life, if you examine the way that your day goes, whatever you're doing, um, and you can pretty much link everything back to your sleep. So when the good bits go well, it's because you've had good sleep, and when the bits don't go as well, it's because you haven't had a good night's sleep. So last night, it was my intention today, after speaking to you, to write. Yesterday I got this brilliant idea, and I was going to write something, and that was going to be my day today. But last night I had a rubbish night's sleep for whatever reason, and I'm just now looking at my day thinking, once I've stopped talking to you, I'm not going to do anything. My day is
100%. Yep.
my day is there's no point, because all I'll do is I'll just look at my screen with a blank document, and I will stare at that for a couple of hours, and then I'll just give up. So what's the point? And I know that. So I build into my life that flexibility of,
Hmm.
I regularly do a radio program in the UK on a Thursday night in the middle of the night. So I know the Friday is going to be a day when I'm not going to be creative. I'm not going to produce anything. So I save up all my little admin tasks, all those annoying little emails for those Fridays because I live my life knowing that there are going to be good days and bad days. I predict that because I know I'm not going to get sleep. Whereas people go through their life being surprised.
Yep.
Oh, I'm having a bad day. Oh, it must be because it's Tuesday. Why? Why? Why
Your
does
body
that?
doesn't know what is Tuesday or Wednesday,
Yeah,
obviously.
you
Yep.
know, and so they're making excuses rather than saying I'm having a bad day because I've, had a poor sleep, and because I've had a poor sleep, it's not going to go away. Going for a walk or having a cup of coffee or tea isn't going to make much difference. So let's acknowledge that and let's do something else rather than being disappointed. And then
100%.
again, with athletes, if you don't feel at your best, there's no point training
100%.
because your baseline is now low and all you're doing is improving to a level that is lower than you're capable of. Well, that's pointless. So, if you haven't had a good night's sleep, don't attempt to break your personal best because it won't happen.
Yeah.
And we know also that if you've had a bad night's sleep and you exercise, you're at a 75% increased risk of getting a sports related
Injury.
injury.
Yes.
So
100%.
don't throw away your career because again, you could just twist your ankle or you could, rupture your Achilles. It's not that the consequence of the accident is that you have an accident. That accident could either be a day off with an ice pack on your ankle, or it could finish your career as an athlete. So why would you do that? Why would you jeopardize it? Um, and you even meet these athletes who say, because I had a bad night's sleep, I'm going to exercise more
More.
to
Yeah.
wake me up. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that.
100%. So when I was going through my undergrad, I'm currently going through my undergrad in my sports science. Our entire gym coaches, we have this kind of a questionnaires when an athlete comes in. We ask them how do you feel today before starting your training, right? How much sleep you had, and XYZ questionnaires. And if they perform on a scale of 0 to 10 at around 5 to 6, we send them home
Yeah, yeah,
because we cannot risk them to injure themselves, and because they are the one who are capable enough to win gold medals in the Olympics, right? We are not able to, we are not willing to take that risk. Like, we cannot take that risk. They might be able to take that risk because they are already sleep deprived. Their judgment of taking right and wrong decision is already flawed, right? But it's up to us to make them see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's just one day of sleep or one day of rest which will help you perform, and I can totally
exactly.
attest that. Yeah. If you are going for any kind of academic performance for any highly intellectual exam, if you are lacking in sleep, your ability to correctly answer those quote unquote really really important questions is gonna be hampered, and you cannot blame it. Even though you have read all the syllabus that you wanted to do, like you have done best when it comes to your studies, if you're not sleep if you are sleep deprived or sleep restricted, you won't be able to recall those concepts at the time of exam. So it's a mute point to attempt that in the first place, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, what's interesting is the more sleepy you are, the less able you are to judge how sleepy you are.
Yes.
And so you get certainly with people like sports who are, there's a degree of arrogance there already. You have to be slightly arrogant. Um, I know I'm okay.
Yeah.
The more sleep you are, the less able you are to be okay. And your thing about exams is, again, a lot of people will revise overnight before the exam. And what happens with that is you gain the information, but you don't process it. You don't
Process it.
lay
Yep.
it down as a memory. And when people talk about laying things down as a memory, it's actually more difficult than that, because what you have is you need to recognize what the important information is. Then you need to lay it down as a memory. But also there are two other stages. One, you need to put it somewhere where
Yep.
you can find it in your brain. And the last one is you have to make the connection between that new piece of information and all the other pieces of information that you already got in your brain. So if you revise overnight before an exam, you'll sit down at the exam and you'll go, I know that. I read that. Like, I know. It's in the brain, but you can't find it.
There is no index. You are not able to judge the index of it.
Exactly. And that's what sleep does. Sleep takes that information and it says, right, this is important. I'm going to file it away where you can find it, and I'm going to collate it with all the other things that go round that. And that's what sleep does. So staying awake all night means you will fail your exams because you cannot um, use knowledge that you can't find. And we know that in school children, if you improve their sleep, they will improve by 1 grade. So they'll go from a C to a B or a B to an A just by improving their sleep.
Yep.
And again, we make life difficult for ourselves, and we act and achieve less than we could simply because we're not getting a good night's sleep. And they say we blame everything else for us not doing well, rather than just thinking, actually, if I just had a good night's sleep, life would be a lot better, a lot easier, a lot nicer. I wouldn't be so angry. I wouldn't be so, I wouldn't make bad judgments, take risky behaviors, get injured, get ill. Why wouldn't you get a better night's sleep? Why do people sit there and go, I have a choice. I can either go to bed or I can watch something on Netflix or Disney or whatever. Why would you ever make the decision not to get a good night's sleep? That's what I don't understand.
100%. And one more insight which I want to give out to my listeners, that in even in sports performance, right, we had multiple studies where people were trying to lose weight, and we have seen this one group had a full complete night of sleep, and the other group was having just 4 hours of sleep. They, even though both of the groups lost relevant to their body weight equal amount of weight, but the group which was being sleep deprived lost more muscle mass comparison to fat mass. And on the other hand, the group which was having ample amount of sleep, they preserved more muscle mass and they lost majorly fat mass. So it goes a long way. And we have also seen that sleep deprivation makes you insulin resistant, right? And
Yeah,
yeah, drops your testosterone level drastically. It basically ages you by 10 years as per compared to your current age. So these things are pretty alarming when we deprive ourselves from the sleep or even restrict.
exactly. And they're so easy to fix.
Yep.
That's the thing. And I think the thing, certainly with sports people and also business executives, and say that to a degree there is this arrogance, and they will try everything, um, rather than, sleep seems too simple. It
Yeah.
doesn't cost anything. It's not magic.
Zero cost investment. Yeah.
So they're unwilling to do it in a way. They feel that there has to be there has to be some guru who is going to give them the secret wisdom, and just saying get a good night's sleep
It's not
doesn't.
fancy enough. Yeah.
It's not
It's
fancy
not
enough,
fancy enough. Yeah.
and
It's a
um,
tough sell. Yeah.
yeah, and this is why I've decided that I'm never going to, selling common sense is never going to make me a millionaire.
Yeah. And we have also seen that common sense is not that much common in even in
Exactly.
common people. Yeah. So on the last note that you have in your book, you have also described the relationship between sleep quality versus the relationships that you have with your partners and in any kind of a relationship. Would you like to throw some light on that?
Yeah, this again goes back to one of these executive functions, which is essentially inhibition, the ability to control your emotions, your reactions, to read body language, to understand tone of voice, and again, relationships, either at work or at home, are based on the ability to read and empathize with that other person when they tell you something, that you understand what they're trying to say, and also
Yeah.
the importance of it to them, because as I say, we have that tone of voice that we use. So we all know the situation where you can have a row with your partner and you're really, really sad, and yet your friend rings up and instantly you switch, and on the phone you go, "You hey," and then you put the phone down and suddenly you're miserable again. So we have this ability to govern our emotions, and again, like what we were talking about accidents or injuries, the same is with relationships. It's only, most arguments that you have in your relationship are about the least important things in your life. They become big because you misinterpret what is behind that statement, and so we lose it. We become angry, we become resentful, we have negative feelings about people, and this is, of course, um, amplified now with things like email and meetings where you can't see the people, so you don't think as much about the content of what you write anymore, and so you are liable just to dash off, a three-line email that
Yeah.
annoys somebody because you're annoyed, and actually you didn't read the original email and you got annoyed by something completely that wasn't written, or you misinterpreted it. And so in order to get on with other people, we have to understand them, and then say that is something that is terribly compromised by lack of sleep. So people who have poor sleep have a higher rate of divorce, they have a higher rate of uh, violence in their relationships, both physical and verbal relationships, and the same with work. There's studies in Australian doctors, and when you have a poor night's sleep, there's a very terrible atmosphere in the operating theatre where people are short or curt or angry, and you don't want that if somebody's got if somebody's in their elbows in your stomach operating on you. You don't want him to be a miserable person who doesn't get on with the anaesthetist, because both of them are there to keep you alive, and you'd rather not
Yeah.
argue with each other. And so again, um, we need to recognise that most of the conflicts that we have, either as with your partner or at work, are down to our inability to uh, regulate our emotions. And you see this with sleepy children. Sleepy children are just crazy. They because they can't express their emotions correctly, and so everything becomes amplified with them because they just can't control it. And we often look at children and think, oh, the child's acting like that because they're sleepy. And you say to a child, you should go to bed, but we never say that to ourselves.
Yeah.
We'll keep an argument going all night if we have to, rather than just saying, look, you're sleepy, I'm sleepy, let's go to sleep, let's come back to this tomorrow morning when we both had a good night's sleep, and we'll be fine. And this is the way as I say, if you look at your life, so many of the things that you want to change or make better in your life don't need self-help books, don't need therapy, don't need this or that drug or this or that supplement. What it needs is a good night's sleep. And it's as simple as that. It's as fundamental as that.
100%. So with that in mind, I just you have summarized it really, really well. Pure gold, words of wisdom, I must say, Dr. Neil. And I think uh, this is the like sleep is being demonized by the society because we live in this society which is a 24-hour society, right? If you are sleeping, they think that you are being lazy because it has been labeled as a being lazy. If you are being too much sleepy or you are spending a lot of time in your bed, because people have this kind of a feed forward approach. They have to be awake, they have to be working, they have to be earning money. But what are your thoughts on this 24-hour society you have mentioned in your book as
Well,
well?
the 24-hour society is it goes back to what we were saying about the circadian rhythm. We're not designed for 24-hour society. Computers, trucks, aircraft, they're fine. We're not. We cannot run 24/7. Um, and the the idea of the 24/7 society is a very cynical view, and it was expressed by the CEO of Netflix a couple of years ago when he said our biggest competitor is not Disney, it's not Hulu, it's not that, it's sleep. If you are asleep, you are not consuming.
Consuming. Yeah.
Um, and Netflix have to sell adverts. Facebook have to sell adverts. Apple have to sell adverts. If you are not consuming for a third of your life, that is a negative thing for these companies. And so, Apple and other people have this dark mode for your phone. So it
Yeah.
reduces the blue. This does nothing, but it makes you think you can use your phone permanently, that there's going to be no negative consequences. Now, stripping blue light out of your phone makes no difference. It still disturbs your sleep. And if Apple cared about you, or Facebook cared about you, they would switch off. They would have a little algorithm in their, server that switched the internet off between 11 and 5 o'clock in the morning or something like. Do you know what I mean? It would take 5 minutes for a computer programmer to come up with a solution. And again, in Britain, when I was growing up, television went off at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Yep.
Did anybody miss it? No. You went to bed. And then in 1984, one of the channels went, 24 hours overnight. And that was good for me because I was staying up all night watching people sleep, so I could now watch television. But there's about 10 people for whom that was a good thing. And now, everybody's available 24 hours a day. And that, as I say, isn't for our benefit. This isn't something that's being done because it's good for us. It's something that's done because the companies want us to be consuming. And all this myth about these people who supposedly had short sleep, the great people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Margaret Thatcher, Napoleon, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, all of these people are said to have been short sleepers. There's no evidence of this at all.
Yeah.
It's a case of boasting how good you are. I am better than you because I don't sleep. So if you're the there was the boss, the old boss of PepsiCo, who she claimed that she got up at 4 o'clock each morning. Now, if you're the boss of a multinational company, you employ people to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't do it yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you're the boss. That means you can play golf and lie on the beach. And that's the thing. These people are saying, I am so important that I have to work 20 hours a day because my company would somehow go bust. Now, if you're one man with a shop and that is your livelihood and the only money you're going to make, then of course you're going to work all hours. But if you're part of a multinational company, whether you're awake or not isn't the most important thing. They are just boasting about it. So we
Posting.
have this, sleep is for wimps. And I would much prefer to have somebody work 8 hours a day at 100% of their potential than somebody
Yeah.
working 20 hours a day at 40% of the potential. And they just think that being awake is somehow good for the company or for whatever. It's just a nonsense. And it's sad really that we've been convinced by this. And one of my favorite stories was about a company, an insurance company in North Wales, who, um, because they were Welsh speaking, they wanted to offer a 24-hour service. And they actually, rather than making their people work shifts, they sent them to live in Australia so they could answer the time at the other place. Are you
Oh,
there, Balash?
yeah, yeah. I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, no, sorry, it's just I've lost your video.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I
I
think
can see you. I can see
okay, so
you.
no, I just thought your bandwidth had gone. I couldn't hear you. You weren't talking, and I thought, oh, maybe you've disappeared. And should I carry on talking? But
No,
yeah,
no,
so
no. I can. I was listening really, really carefully. Yeah.
okay, so this, I say, so the 24-hour society is, in the past it was important. You had the machines, you had the factories, you had things you couldn't turn off. You couldn't switch off a coal mine. You couldn't switch off a steelworks. It was impossible. So you had to make people work shifts. You had to um, do that. But now the vast majority of jobs that are 24 hours are not necessary. Nobody needs to pay their phone bill or their electricity bill in the middle of the night. Nobody needs shops open 24 hours a day. Nobody needs TV 24 hours a day. We should be asleep at this time. And
100%.
so, as I say, it's a con. We've been conned into believing that we have to continually serve this you know, this beast, this, and we have to spend our money. And we have to look at their adverts and consume their product. So that's why we have it. In the past, we had it, but then we gave it up. As the industrial revolution progressed and we became less industrial and more caring of our society, in 1850 we got the 8-hour Day Act, and by the First World War, by 1911, most people were working 8 hours a day, and now we're going backwards for no
Yeah.
reason. You still only get paid for 8 hours a day,
100%.
but you take your laptop home and you work until 11 o'clock at night and something like that. And when I started work back in 1982, there was such a thing as overtime. You got paid for working extra. Now you don't. And somehow we feel we have to do it because we might lose our job or something. And it's a complete and utter con. And it's just making profits for people. It's as simple as that. It can't be said any better.
100%. And I can totally correlate with the fact that it's the quality which is way more important than the quantity. That just you just mentioned that you would rather prefer someone giving their 100% best for 8 hours instead of dragging for the entire 16 hours and not performing it, whether they're any kind of a work, any kind of endeavors and up to their mark. So that as really words of wisdom coming out of you, Dr. Neil. Can totally attest to that. So I think we are close to 2 hour mark, and I still have a lot of questions to ask
Well,
Dr.
we
Neil.
can do this again. There's no
Yeah, yeah,
problem at all.
definitely, definitely. So, because we have laid down a really, really great framework of what sleep is, how does it affect, what is the circadian rhythm, why sleep is important for your health, for your academic performance, for your sports performance, for your leadership performance, for your physiological side, for your psychological side. So, I think we have tackled a lot of can of worms today, and then in our next installment or next meeting with me with Dr. Neil, I think we will be tackling on how we can improve our sleep if you are not sleeping well. Definitely, right? There are multiple sleep disorders. There are multiple things that we have to tackle definitely for our listeners. So
No, it'd be great to do that.
yeah. So till that time, Dr. Neil, where can people find you and find your work?
Okay, well, my website is the sleep consultancy, all as one word, .com. So that's the best place to find things I've written and who I am and what I do. So that's the best place to find me.
Definitely. And I will link down the references to Dr. Neil's book, How to Sleep Well. And I believe I have read a lot of books when it comes to the sleep. Your book is too so much precise to the point. It does not have those kind of a gimmicky infographics, or you can say you can glitter and gold or sunshine and rainbows, but it contains the information that everyone needs to read in the first place. It's so precise, it's to the point, it's not mumbling here and there, it's not beating around the bush. And I will definitely recommend your book to a lot of people and to my listeners by
Yes.
giving out the reference in the show notes. So, once again, Dr. Neil, thanks a lot for accepting this invite and giving your crucial time by also coming to over to this podcast. And I definitely feel enlightened about learning about the sleep and the nuances behind the sleep. So once again, thank you. Uh,
It's been a
Dr.
great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hello, listeners. I hope you would have liked this episode of the podcast series. And if you did, please feel free to share it with your friends, families, and your colleagues so that they can also get benefit from the science based discussion that we just had. With that in mind, this podcast, along with all the episodes, is now available on all the major platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, along with the audio visual media YouTube. So, with that in mind, let me bid adieu for this time, and I will see you in the next episode.